Okay, so we've now got rid of the background and we're at the stage where we're going to start to composite this image together with a new background, and we're going to add some snow, and then we're going to edit the final colors so that they match in and it's got a little bit more reality, so both of the images that we put together have a similar color range. So the very first thing that I'm going to do, there are a couple of different ways of doing this, but I'm just going to show you the easiest way for this particular image. Like I said, there are different ways of doing this, but we're just going to do the easiest way. And I'm going to open up a file, and I'm just going to simply, I'll bring it back into screen. I'm just going to simply drag and drop. This is a image that I've taken a few years ago in Japan. And what I'm going to do, now that I've dropped this into the image, I'm going to zoom out. So I'm going to do Command and the minus button. This just makes life a little bit easier. Effectively, what you're doing at the moment is choosing the size and location of the way that Photoshop is going to bring this image into this workspace. So if we hold down the Shift key, when we make the adjustments by holding onto the corner here, it will keep the ratio of the images correct so that it will just expand the photo, keeping the same ratio. So now that I've got that to a decent spot, I'm just going to hit return, and it's going to give me the background there that I want. Again, if you're going to be using an image, just feel free to pretty much, for the sake of a tutorial, just hunt for any snow background. I'm sure you'll find something out there. And I'm going to bring that underneath, just drag it down, and we now have the snowy background that we're going to start working with. Now that we don't need this layer, which is called black anymore, I'm just going to simply come down to the little trash can whilst I have it selected, and I'm going to delete it because we don't need it anymore. That was just a temporary project thing so that we could see what we were getting rid of and what we'd missed. So the very first thing that I'm going to do when I'm going to be editing these together is, now that I'm dealing with just the simple two images, because we've saved all of those original ones, we've put them in a folder, so if we stuff something up, we can go back and we can re-edit these things together. But at the moment, I'm happy with the way things are, so I'm just going to deal with these two files that we have. Seeing as this photograph was taken with a telephoto lens, it would in reality be a very blurry background. It'd be very out of focus, and there wouldn't be a great deal of information simply because of the way the photo was taken. So what we need to do is replicate the way that should look within Photoshop. So what we need to do is add a blur effect to the background image, which would be the snowy mountains all around here, so that it looks more realistic, because in real life there is no way that that would be as in focus as it is. So we're going to go into another section within Photoshop now, which is called the filters. It says filters, but it's really sort of an effects bar. So I'm going to make sure I select the Hakuba mountain, which is the mountain in Japan. We're going to come up to the top here where it says filter. When you click on that, you'll show that it gives you a whole list of filter effects that you can put on here. If you click on the filter gallery, it will come up with just zoom out, it'll come up with a list of all the different variations of stuff that you can put on the image. But for the sake of what we're doing, we don't want to go into this one right now because this isn't the section that we're after. I just thought I'd show you that because that's where a lot of great little sort of effects for artistic impressions on images can come from. So we're going to come up to the filter, making sure that we've got the mountain layer selected. I'm going to come down to blur, and you could choose most of these, but I just seem to use Gaussian or box blur quite regularly, so I'm just going to click on the Gaussian one. And you want to make sure that the preview bar is ticked, because that will give you a live indication on the image behind of what is happening. Now, in reality, this photograph, the background would be very, very out of focus. So I'm going to just keep moving this radius up until I think it matches something which would be a little bit more realistic as to what the image would be. Now, going off history of taking photos, I'm going to say something around that would probably be okay. It's good enough. So we're just going to click on OK. And we've now blurred out that background so that we can give a little bit more realistic look to the image. And what I'm going to do next is to blur out some of the sort of the issues that we've had with the fur around the outside. We're going to add a blur layer to that as well, because by doing that, what we're doing is reducing the depth of field within the whole photo by making it a little bit more around the outside here. So I'm going to grab the layer which is called merged. Let's rename that one now to our snow leopard so we know that that's the good one that we want. That is terrible spelling, but it will do. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to say duplicate. I'm going to call this one blur. Effectively what I'm going to do is something very similar to what we've just done with the previous one, but just not to the same extent. So I'm going to get it. I'm going to bring our blur just down a little bit, a little more, so that it's just a little bit softer around the edges. I'm going to click on OK. And what I want to do is make sure that the area around the face here is all in focus and it starts to go out of focus as we get further out. So again, what we're going to do is create another mask. As usual, I'm going to invert it because I don't really want it there at the moment. I'm only going to paint it in to the areas that I want. So I'm going to grab my brush. I'm going to come up to just a very standard soft brush. I'm going to make it fairly large, but not that large. I'm going to make sure my opacity is up at 100%. I'm just going to paint in the areas around here where the cat is a little bit further out of focus. So the parts which are further away on the cat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease the opacity. I'm going to decrease the size of my brush as well. And then just paint in just a little bit around the face here, just so that it matches in just a little bit more. So we've just effectively decreased the depth of field of that cat so that it blends in and it gets rid of the harsh edges around the fur just a little bit more so that it blends in nicely. Now that I've done that, you can see the way that it's been done here. I could leave it at that, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to merge them together because I'm happy with that and I don't want to be dealing with too many layers. So let me select those and I'm going to merge layer. It's called blur, so I'm just going to rename that again. We'll call it snow. Okay, even got it right that time, which is a miracle. And from this point, this is where we start getting into the fun part of making it look a little bit more realistic. Now, one of the other things you want to make sure when you're doing this is the two images that you're using, you want to make sure that the shadows are going in the same direction. It might sound simple and it might sound obvious, but it is something which is easy to overlook. So you'll notice that the shadows are coming from left to right on the snow leopard, and on this particular photo, they're also going from left to right. If they were going from right to left, the whole image wouldn't work, and you'd really have to flip either the leopard or the background so that the shadows are going in the right direction. So we're just going to turn that layer back on. Now, what I want to do is make another adjustment layer to this image so that I can blend these two together. But the first thing I'm going to concentrate on is getting the background to a color that I want. So I'm going to turn off the snow leopard, and I want this adjustment layer that I'm going to use to only affect this Huckleberry layer, not this snow leopard one. So we have to make sure that our adjustment is going on just above the area that I want. I'm going to go for a curves adjustment. I'm going to just decrease it so it's a little bit darker in the background. But this is when I want to show you something which you can also do by using the curves adjustment. You don't only get to play with the brightness and the contrast. If you come up to here where it says RGB, there are individual channels for the red, the green, and the blue. Now, by choosing the red, you can increase the red channel on its own. You can go to the blue channel and do the same thing to the blue channel. So you can be very specific in what you want to do, and you can do it with the green channel as well. So let's just say, let's give it a little bit more of the blue, which we've already got in there. And let's make this a very contrasty blue image. So we've gone for that, and you'll notice it shows you an idea of what's going on with the other one. And let's just make this very contrasty to begin with, and we'll step it back from there, and we'll make this more of an artistic-y one rather than a realistic version. Okay, so now that we've got that done to that background with that curve, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the snow leopard, and I'm going to create another curves layer, but I only want it to adjust the snow leopard itself. So again, I'm going to right click on the snow leopard itself, or you can hold Control and click on it. I'm going to come down to where it says select pixels. It is only going to select the pixels of this layer, and you'll notice it comes up with a selection right around that layer and only that layer. I'm going to come down, I'm going to go to my curves adjustment, and it's going to create a curves adjustment with the mask directly for that layer below. And seeing as the way it's been cut out, it will be affecting this layer here, but seeing as the snow leopard is in front of that layer, you won't see the difference. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to come down to our blue, and I'm going to increase that like we did on the other one, so that it looks a little bit bluer there. I'm going to come back up to the RGB, which enables us to increase the contrast. I'm going to increase that a little bit too. Not quite so much. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to leave it at that. That should be pretty good. We can, from this point, move on to doing some other things to these images. But the first thing I've just noticed, which I don't really like, and I think it's a good thing to show right now, is I think the top half of this image here is too bright. So how are we going to fix that? I'm going to show you. We're going to basically do a neutral density gradient filter, which would be what you'd use on the camera, but we're going to do a version of that, but we're going to do it within Photoshop. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a layer just above the curves layer. It doesn't matter if it was below, but I'm going to do it above just to be safe. So I'm going to create a new layer. And over here where we have our paint bucket, if we hold that down, it comes up with a thing which says gradient tool. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to give us a bunch of options up here. You want to make sure that you've got it on the first option, and I'm going to click on this section here, which has, it starts with black and goes to nothing. You'll also have another version down here, which starts with a light gray and goes to nothing. What I'm going to do is start with this one, which starts with the black. I'm going to click over here. Now, what happens with this gradient tool is wherever direction you basically drag the mouse is the direction it will create the gradient. Now, I want this to go directly vertical, so I'm going to hold the shift button. I'm going to hold the mouse, and it's going to only allow me to go at 45, 90, and every 45 degrees, it will allow me to only go in that direction. So I'm going to create my gradient. And the issue which I have here is I didn't look at the color which I had chosen first, which is a good thing because it's now shown you a mistake that you can easily make. If you don't have black chosen, it will use a different color. So I'm going to say Command Z. I'm going to change my color back to black. I'm going to change my other color to white so that I know that I'm getting the exact colors that I want. I'm going to do that all over again. And you'll notice that it's made it quite dark. Again, I'm going to come up to this section where it says normal. I'm going to say multiply, which hasn't done what I wanted, but it's fine. I'll stick that back to normal then. I'm going to go on the opacity, and I'm just going to decrease that just a little bit so that it is darkening the sky, but you've got control over the way you want it to look. So effectively, by creating that gradient layer and changing its opacity, we have darkened the sky. It's a cheap way of doing it. You're always better, if you're actually taking photographs, you're better off doing it on the camera. But if you are doing it on Photoshop, that's a cheater's way to put a graduated filter effect on. From this point here, I am going to mold these 3 layers here, and I'm going to put them into a folder so that they're out of the way and they stop getting confused by things. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just going to call this one Mountain. We'll drag that down to underneath the snow leopard. I'm going to choose those 3 layers that we've created for the mountain. I'm going to drag them in, and I'm just going to close that arrow off because it just neatens up the layers that we've been dealing with. Now, we want to move on to making snow. So what you need to think of when you're going to be making snow is there's going to be snow behind the leopard, and there's also going to be snow in front of the leopard. So you need to make sure that you make a layer in front of the leopard for a small amount of snow and a layer behind the snow leopard so that you can have more snow behind that, so that it gives you the depth. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with the snow which is behind the leopard but in front of the mountains. So I'm going to click on the mountains, and I'm going to click new layer, which is going to put it above that. I'm going to call this background snow. Now again, this is where you're going to want to have searched the internet. There are a whole bunch of brushes out there. I'm sure if you search the internet and type in snow brush for Photoshop, something will turn up fairly quickly. I already have one I've made myself. I'm going to come to the brush preset, and this doesn't look very pretty to me. I don't like the way that that's going to be working. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click on the scatter tool, and I want to scatter it out so that it looks a little bit nicer. I want the count to be fairly good. You can come through, you can play with the shape dynamics, you can make it so that it rotates and all kinds of crazy stuff. We won't worry about getting too in-depth with it at the moment because it's only snow. Now effectively what I'm going to do is come through, and I'm going to paint in a bunch of snow. Occasionally you might want to go through and just change the size of your brush, because it will just change the size of the particles that you're dealing with. Now you want to make sure that you don't neglect the areas just behind, because, oops, that's gone too much, because you can do that quite easily. Now you're looking at that saying, that doesn't look real. We need to use our blur technique again. So we're going to come up to our blur tool. I'm going to go Gaussian blur. I'm going to make sure the preview's turned on so that we can see what we're doing. And I want to blur this quite a lot so that it's in the background, but it's still kind of looking like snow. There we go. Now we want to do this all again, but we want to do this in front of the snow leopard. Now you need to make sure that the layer isn't being put in front of this adjustment layer, because otherwise this adjustment layer will change the color of the snow in front of the leopard. So we need to make our snow above that. So I'm going to go new layer. Okay, front snow. I'm going to increase the size of my snow because this snow is closer to the camera. I'm just going to do a few for this one. So I don't want it to be too crazy. I still want it to look a little bit realistic. I'm going to make another big one for it as well, so that we've got a couple of really close ones. I'll just click on that. We want to come through and we want to do the blur technique again, but this time we don't want it to be quite as in focus. We want them to be a little bit more out of focus because we really want them to look like they're super close to the camera, in between you and the leopard, so that they're really quite out of focus. So I'm going to click on OK for that one. And seeing as I don't think there's quite enough, let's just going to make a second snow. I'll just call this one second front. And create a bit more snow. And we'll do another blur, but this time I'm not going to blur it quite as much because this stuff will be the snow which is closer to the leopard, so that it's really being done in stages. We'll click on OK. And we effectively have an image which has gone from a boring image of a snow leopard in a zoo with a very plain background to something, if you're going to spend the time, you can go through, use these layered effects to get it to the point that you want. Now, once you've reached this point, you can merge it all together and do further adjustments. You can leave it as it is, but there's going to be one thing which I'm going to do to this to make life very simple. And seeing as I'm happy with this, I'm not going to do any more adjustments. You can duplicate these layers. There are other ways of doing this, but again, I'm just making this simple for the tutorial. Again, the more time you put into this and the more layers you're willing to make, the better the outcome will be. But for this tutorial, I'm now going to merge all of these together, which we have previously created. I'm going to come up to our effects bar. I've been talking too long. I've now got a dry throat. And I'm going to come to Filter Gallery. Now that this layer has all been merged together as one thing, you can go through and you can do a whole bunch of artistic effects to these. Now, you're probably looking at this and wondering why it's looking quite strange. It's because it's showing the entire image with the background image as well. To stop the confusion, see, if I hold the button down, it shows you that that background image is still there. It isn't in the space of the canvas that you can see, but it is still in the image. So we want to get rid of that. So I'm going to click on this crop tool, and it's going to just bring up an area around the cat. I'm going to click on return, and it's going to crop out all of the other stuff which we didn't want. So that stuff's all now gone. I'm going to come back up to our filter gallery and do the same thing. I'm not quite sure why it keeps going to that particular one, but so be it. Now, these are where you find all of your effects. So you can come through, you can do all the artsy stuff you want to it, and you could make it something as crazy as this, which, you know, you can come through and you can adjust. If you're really looking to do something which is sort of artistic and it's for something in particular, you can come through and do it this. It makes it sort of like a sort of an animated sort of look. There are a whole bunch of different variations of things that you can use, but I'm just going to use that one for the moment. We've now thrown that together, and you have got a cat with a background with the snow. You can choose whatever kind of effect you want to do to it, or you can leave it as it was. It really is your choice. That is the basic steps of Photoshop and what you can get out of it if you're willing to spend the time. I know it's gone from being, for people which haven't done anything before, it might be a little bit too in-depth, but I figured I wanted to show you how to do some of the more advanced techniques rather than showing you the super simple ways of doing everything and making this slow. I believe you're probably better following along with something like this, because I believe you'll learn more by using more of these layers and the advanced techniques than simply doing really, really basic material. If there's anything else that you would like to see out of this tutorial, I can continue on with further videos. Just put some comments in the bottom. Remember to subscribe, and if there's anything in particular you want, feel free to email me at youtube@benmccallum.com. That link is in the information below. As I said, remember to subscribe, send us the feedback, because we only know what you want when you tell us. I'm Ben McCallum. I'm really hoping this tutorial has helped you all out, and we'll catch you next time.